We're live. Kia ora! Oh, look, the people are leaping in. Apologies, gang. We're chatting. Give you a moment to join us. Oh, someone's cat in the background.
I'm sorry. I have to let you know. Hopefully she'll lie down and...
It's all right. That's all right. My cat likes to be... It's only that I've shut the door and given the cat to a child to look after. Otherwise, my cat would be in here as well, joining in. Oh. All right. Kia ora and welcome people who are just jumping on board and joining in. We will just give it a minute for people to log in. Well done for being here on a Wednesday afternoon, week 6 of the term. The time as ever. Is this a musical interlude? What's I do? It needs to start. We should design my own whole music. Okay, I'm going to make a start just because we want to keep it as ever short and snappy. So I'll just begin as if it was karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hi aki ana a te kura, he te ao, he huka, he hauhiu, ti hei, Māori ora. It is thankfully not frosty today. Got a bit of a fight the other day when there was full ice all over the lawn. But it has been quite glorious. But nice, still nice one just to bring us all back together still in our time. So tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Claire Coleman tuko inga, kia ora, and welcome to, I guess, the first of a new after school special series, which is, we've got phase 1 to 4, the first of these that have come out since we started doing these sessions. And I'm delighted and thrilled to be joined as ever by my lovely guests who are going to kind of talk us through what they see so far in terms of the phase 1 to 4 social sciences learning area, what's shifted from the version that we looked at when we looked at the draft, what opportunities there might be, what some of the challenges might still be, and just kind of start to kind of tackle having a look at things. We appreciate that this has only been out for 2 weeks, I think. Yeah, 2 weeks today. So still lots of time to unpack, lots of content still to unpack. As ever, this resource that I'm going to walk you through, I'll pop the link into the chat, and it'll all go up again with everything on the Substack later. And it does have some links on there as well for you to click into to give you some extra guidance, other places to go as you start to make sense of this document for yourself. So I might just turn to my two guests. Maybe I'll start with you, Pip, if you're happy to just very, very briefly, and I'm going to be very mean and brief with you, just introduce yourself to any of our viewers who are not familiar with you, and then if you can hand over to Maria as well.
Thank you, Claire. Ngā mihi nui a koutou katoa. So lovely that you're in the site tonight and interested in the development of this important curriculum for young people going forward. Sure, the ministry or whoever has worked with this has certainly changed, has certainly responded to a lot of the criticism. I'm not saying it's great or it's complete, but it's certainly an improvement given the conceptual mapping and what's called conceptual knowledge. It makes a difference. It fills a gap. I think there are, obviously it has been strengthened. The ministry has taken pains in its responses to talk about strengthening and being explicit and mastery over students' mastery over the content, we could argue that this process of paring it down might constrain it more. Okay, so I'll just start with that, and maybe Maria would like to move on.
Ahi ahi Marie koutou, ko Maria Pro tuku ingoa. I am the kaiarahi for the Aotearoa Social Studies Educators Network, and we currently have an ongoing networks of expertise contract to support and implement or help support teachers' implementation or understanding of, to start with, I guess, and the implementation of this new curriculum document. So as Pip has said, it's lovely that those of you who are here with us live, but also that this is going to be recorded and sent out. So kia ora, and I'm sure there's some familiar faces out there watching. We are going to, I think, fairly rapidly unpack this because this is a short, quick fire. But just to acknowledge what Pip said around what there's a lot of change, and you can see there what Claire's put up on this. This is a fundamental shift compared to that draft, and we are pleased to see that some essential social sciences like the conceptual knowledge framing and the practices have actually been put back in. And we'll stop there for now.
Lovely, thank you. I should say to participants, if you do have questions or comments you want to pop into the chat, feel free to do so. Hopefully that's all active for you, and I will try to come back and forth and kind of keep an eye on it. All right, so the first thing to note, as we just mentioned, was that this is quite a big shift from the draft material that we looked at before. And so it's, taken a bit of looking at in terms of the variation. There has been the addition of the concept mapping, and I've popped that file actually into this PowerPoint so you can have a look at that for yourself, which kind of talks about, I guess, what we would previously have talked about with the old one is kind of the understand part of the curriculum, the sort of the underpinning big ideas type stuff. And that there has been a significant reduction in the amount of content, which, was a big critique of the previous draft. So maybe if we move on and look now at the purpose and the vision, so talking about the why of the social sciences education, and both maybe sort of talking to the how social sciences has been positioned or explained in the purpose, and then how this is carried through or not carried through into the rest of the content. So whether or not kind of some of the language that's talking about multiple perspectives or critical engagement and those sorts of things is realized or not through the content. Pip, do you want to speak to that one?
Yeah, I'm looking at the purpose statement. They've certainly reduced the statement to the point it's bare bones. It does assert how I'll read this to you. Social sciences equip students to engage critically with societal issues and to evaluate the sustainability of alternative social, economic, political, and environmental practices. I do not see that within the phases of content. I do not see any criticality. It's a very neutral document, and it has been obviously created by differing groups of people. So civics and society, the language, for instance, is so neutral, and across years 1 to 10, all about, lovely democracy and healthy democracies and lovely dialogue, and everybody can belong to community. The word society is not used in that strand. Deliberately, interestingly, they have used the word communities and groups. It puts a whole different focus on a strand whereby students need to be looking at issues. They need to be looking at why leadership happens. They need to be looking at media critique, but there is nothing there. So that's just an example.
Okay, thank you. Marie, do you want to talk to the strands of the social sciences? So that the 4 strands: history, geography, civics and society, and financial and economic activity. How does that sit in terms of previous work?
I think we were all very shocked when the final curriculum came out to see the financial and economic activity had changed. So many economic activity, conceptual understandings and conceptual statements have been removed. That was pretty shocking, I think, for everyone, including our colleagues who are in the subject association supporting commerce and economics. So it's very focused on financial literacy, learning about your own individual relationship with money and ability to understand money and how you can save and things like that. There's a little bit more economic activity sort of coming into United 10, but we know that it is quite concerning in terms of how pared back that has been for how prepared are teachers going to be able to get students to enter into whatever is coming in the senior school. Obviously the civics and society is fairly short as well. As Pip has said, everything sort of is written very neutrally. The criticality and the critical citizenship aspects are missing, let's just say. And then I would say, obviously, with the history, yes, a lot has been removed and things have been shifted around in terms of listening to feedback, but there's still by far the most content is in the history strand, and it remains to be seen how teachers are going to manage just the sheer amount of content that's in that history strand alone, and how are teachers going to, it'll have to be superficial if you're covering everything, and I don't think that's actually what we want for our young people, is having superficial facts without having the actual deep conceptual understandings.
I know we talked the other day when we were speaking before this around the inquiry practices and the sort of some of those things having come back into this final version that were not previously seen in the draft. And how do you feel those are operating across the strands?
Well, in my view,
yeah,
whoever has developed these strands, they struck a problem because they had to kind of address the conceptual underpinnings, the ideas, whether abstract or concrete, of social sciences. And so they did that. And then they couldn't avoid using our familiar terms such as values and perspectives, inquiry. But there is a reservation that nobody is to use inquiry, at the front of the document somewhere. I mean, that's ridiculous. The whole inquiry is just questioning or finding out. And also social action and social decision-making is mentioned in some of the practices. So I believe, why have we gone to a whole new curriculum when we could have just developed or reinforced what we had? It's ridiculous. And I just don't think what's given in this draft is really suitable for our young people, especially in the primary school. So what has happened, but I'll use history as an example. The document states they've adhered to very strict disciplinary maxims and practices. However, the historical strand is very traditional. Its core focus is really political, wars, diplomacy, and actions of famous statesmen or monarchs. If you look into that, the structure is linear because of the obviously great need by someone to have exact chronology. And so there's a tracking of landmark events through the phases of the history. It's a very narrow and Eurocentric reviewing of the past from dominant points of view. And why is this so? Well, I guess the government wants to preserve official milestones or political narratives that it likes, that it sees as important. So what has changed? So we've lost a kind of modern interdisciplinary focus where we can look at historical understandings all past through cultural, social, economic, or environmental or whatever. Previously, our learning area was structured as an interdisciplinarity of ideas and building generalizations and using various modes of evidence. And that meant we could include perspectives, multiple perspectives. We could look at ordinary people and we could look at marginalized groups. So why was the old one very useful? Because we could critique and question the complexity of human experiences. And my main problem is these are young people who are not getting a critical and a curriculum that is applicable and relevant to their experiences in the main. Sorry, that's a long explanation, but I had to get it out.
Yep. No, that's why we have your expertise here.
I would just jump in and mention geography as well, in that I think it's important to state that the geography strand actually does bring in some ability to deal with some actual contemporary social issues, and looking at how geography then connects to some of those economic activity concepts and civics and society. I think that's where some of that, what Pip was just talking about, that's certainly the work that our organisation is going to be doing, and I know the other subject associations are interested in as well, because that is the rich and engaging and really meaningful and necessary learning, making sure that those contexts, the connections between things are being made, because we don't live in silos.
No. It's always a weird one to me. People talk too much about their, subjects as if they are things like exist in the world. Mary, could you just talk to the just the next slide there, just talking a little bit about the progression and how because I know one of the concerns with the draft content was things being out of in the wrong places in terms of the content, the suitability of the content, and then there not being a good progression. How has that shifted, do you feel?
I think it has been, the fact that even like that conceptual mapping has been done is helpful, and teachers will have to make an effort to remember to go back to that, though. It's not, there is so much content and all of the bullet points and the knowledge statements that I think it could be really easy for teachers to get lost and just focus on those bullet points, and really in your planning and being really purposeful and intentional about linking those bullet points back to these higher conceptual statements will be really important, because that's where you get your transferable knowledge, the stuff that we really want them to be able to show progression then over the year levels, is with the concepts, and then can they apply those into the different contexts that they've got. So from year to year, as we know, you will forget maybe some of the finer bullet point details of things, but holding on to those concepts and being able to transfer that knowledge into the new context that we are having, that has to be the priority, because there's just too much content for us to expect that young people are going to hold all of that detail in their heads. Just like we haven't held every single thing we ever learnt from primary school through to university to, but the concepts we have. And I'll just quickly say that the progression in terms of the practices, I do feel like this is a weakness. I still don't feel like that's actually been done particularly well in terms of looking how skills and practices, what we should be expecting from students by the end of phase 1 and year 2 and 3, 4, for example. I think some that work is still needing to be done. It's rushed. There's no way around it. The time frame was ridiculous.
Okay. I will get to that, I think, in our last moments, to think about how teachers are to tackle this, given that this is what has been issued currently as the final document. We will look at this Te question, but we will try to keep it relatively quick. I know one of the significant critiques around the draft was around the positioning of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, both in terms of how it was part of the foundational materials and how it was part of the foundation of this work and the bicultural nature of a curriculum, but also in terms of where the content lay and how the content had been addressed. There is, I think, Te Tiriti is now in this content. You can see it in places, and it is dealt with at different phases. Does anyone want to tackle this one?
Okay. The Treaty of Waitangi should have a centrality in the curriculum, and it has had that up to now, and particularly in Te Marutanga. The ideas of colonizing processes, indigeneity were really strong, which actually helped the study of treaty. The treaty is a cultural blueprint for us in New Zealand, and I also think it can reflect a diverse citizenry. So why are we not talking about tangata whenua and tangata tiriti? Instead, at phase 3, the treaty text is looked at, and it's looked at in terms of political sorry, I just lost my flow there. Yeah.
Marie, do you want to jump in?
Thank you.
I am not so familiar with those early phases at the moment, but I guess, yeah, I would say, as you have pointed out, and Claire, you've got that quote up there as well, that there's a complete neutralization and deproblematizing of Te Tiriti and why it was created, why it was necessary. Just that conflict grew because Māori and European settlers had different ideas. Well, yeah, that's a very it's just, yeah, it doesn't get to the heart of what the issues were. The colonization, for example, is one thing that teachers really, I believe, will still really unpack. It's just that if you're not a social science specialist, for the majority of our primary school teachers, this isn't a specialty that they've had years and years of study in. It's knowing that when they see statements like that, that this means they should be teaching about colonization, or this means they need to be critical of this. So that's where we see our work as an organisation in helping teachers to understand where that criticality is required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think primary teachers have accepted through the previous Education Act actually looking at colonizing processes and the treaty. And previously, we could look at treaty studies or contexts through social or environmental or cultural gazes, not just a kind of a political thing. I can see the government sitting there. But what disturbs me is that the Teaching Council standards, there are two standards in particular in 26 that require teachers to understand treaty partnership and their progression or their personal growth, professional growth, needs to understand the content of the treaty and the curriculum and their own particular knowledge and how they're going to apply it. So I don't see a kind of good match between this curriculum and the professional standards. That's just a thing I looked at today. I thought that was really, really interesting. I also would like to mention that because of the content and the suggested topics that are huge, absolutely huge, there's little place to actually explore anything to do about society and culture. And are we in social studies or social sciences, are we supposed to be preparing a dynamic and diverse citizenry? Should we be thinking about our own academic freedom as teachers? What happened to human rights education? What about critical media literacy? What about racism, sexism? The contents of our curriculum as they stand here are very male-centered. And usually women are seen as the usual women worthies. And I think that's a real problem, that we cannot really look at gendered perspectives, really. I think Maria is doing an amazing job because she is trying to, Maria, I'm talking for you, sorry, but what you're doing is trying to unpack how it could look. But if it's not clear to teachers, that kind of effort and work, it shouldn't have to happen. For instance, all the phases and the contents, there's a massive amount of information in the history strand particularly. And is it suggesting that teachers don't know about it? Yes, it probably is. So what should be done? And what is going to be assessed? I don't know. I can't read that or see that at the moment. Anyway,
No, and I think that assessment question is one of the most pressing questions that teachers have, which is very valid and fair enough. And once again, the ministry has been very silent. There's nothing coming out about how they are going to be expected to, whether they are creating their own assessments, whether there's this very detailed prescribed content, and then there is no sort of guidance about how we actually are assessing students' understanding of those concepts, as well as then the the practices. So, I mean, there are a lot of questions to still be asked. Well, and I know that subject associations, as well as other professional bodies and unions, are asking these questions, and we just have to keep on asking them.
Yeah. I'd just like to comment that in the purpose statement, there's a nice little statement about local, national context, blah, blah, blah. In the geography strand at phase 3, one of the options of contents is looking at earthquakes. Yet there is no mention of, for instance, Napier or Christchurch earthquakes that are very relevant and in terms of challenges, responses. Also in phase 3, the New Zealand wars, they are looked at through a long period from 1830 and then taking up the 20th century, looking at leaders such as Ngata and Buck and Pomeroy. It's also, this is content that has been lifted by AI or something to kind of fit. And it has actually come from an earlier kind of year 11 kind of suite of contexts that were done in history, probably before NCEA. And in phase 4, colonization, the only time colonization is used is in relation to options of studying Pacific, like Tonga or Samoa, food sharing or food gathering contexts. But it's not applied to New Zealand society. And I think that is just such a huge gap. Anyway, that is an interesting thing. There are some quirks in this. And I also think the financial literacy is the area that I'm least knowledgeable about. I understand about resources and work and economic activity. The financial literacy starts with the concept of money. Well, how do people make money? And where do they get money from? That isn't explored. Neither are issues around poverty or welfare or homelessness or whatever. So our critical gaze as social sciences educators is kind of lost through all of the strands.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. I very much value everyone's energy and time of an afternoon. I've just been moving, as you can see, through the document now, so you can see some of the elements and tensions and these questions that I think we've sort of mapped around. Before I just get to my last slide, I just wanted to go back to you, Maria, about kind of in terms of the document, what, looking at it, navigating it as a teacher. Some of the elements I know are mandatory. Some of the elements are giving you options. Can you just talk to that sort of sense of things a little bit?
Yes. So subject associations, we had a meeting with the Ministry of Education the day after this was released, and it was made clear to us through that conversation that obviously there are lots of examples presented throughout the curriculum document under the bullet points and the content for both the practices and in the knowledge strand. Anything that says, for example, are just there to guide you and are optional things. Right. Anything that says including and then has a bullet point, those things that are bullet pointed under the word including with the colon, they are considered to be compulsory content that you must teach. It's not just that they're using a different word and just sort of listing down other options. That the ministry's message was that they are expected to be compulsory, which adds to say that there is actually a lot of content here, and that some of those bullet points are so briefly mentioned. Like, for example, one great to see that the Christchurch call is in there, but there's no context around that, for example. And this is where resourcing is going to be really, really important, because a lot of these bullet points don't really offer a huge amount to teachers in terms of like how are we actually going to teach this in order to get back to that high level conceptual understanding.
Yeah, and that's your concern again, I suppose, in terms of it just being a list of stuff. If the resourcing isn't there and teachers and they're not given enough, that it will get that sort of superficial.
Yeah, we don't want them to just list bullet points and get a check mark in a test.
Yeah,
because they can state what the 3 bullet points were under that particular content block. That's not what we consider to be social science understanding.
Okay. All right. I'm going to wrap it up there. I want to thank both of my guests, Pip and Maria, for your time, both before we met and obviously your contribution this afternoon. As I said, this will all go up on Substack as usual. This document, these are all little click buttons. If you're interested, there's a summary of some of the things we talked about with the draft material. If you follow that, click on that button. There's the final learning area there. There's a link to the Social Studies Association, the New Zealand History Teachers Association. There's a little bit of expert response that recently came out around the science and social sciences if you want to do a bit of further reading. And if you see further up, as I said, that concept mapping is up there as well. Maria, would you give anyone, what's your final kind of recommendation for things that people should do when facing this now?
I would follow your subject associations. Make sure you're a member. It's free to join ASIN. We put out things. There is a webinar that the 4 social science networks of expertise are going to host next Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. So that will include all 4 strands. And we're going to dive a little deeper into the actual knowledge and practices of the 4 strands during that webinar. And I think in the meantime, it's just really whichever year levels you are planning for, just reading the document with a criticality would be my thing, and trying to see where you already are doing some of this content, because some of the things have been done in Aotearoa histories, for example, and you may have resources that are very suitable from Aotearoa histories to bring with their criticality into some of these knowledge statements as well.
Yep, it's always good to dig through, have a look at what you've already got, what resources can be, reinvigorated with a bit of different thinking. We have a comment. Oh, Barbara has a comment, so let me read it out to you before we go. What we need to support the education of Aotearoa is to see where New Zealand education started and the history of New Zealand education. Okay, I'll throw that to you.
What we need.
Can you see that comment?
Yeah, I can. We have to understand the educational context and purpose of what we're doing and why, and where curriculum sits. And I'm also thinking about teachers. The curriculum suggests that teachers need to be told what to do. So I mean, there is that. I'm coming back to the learner though, and I also think the whole purpose of what we're doing in social sciences is understanding the learners and their identities and their cultural assets, and that there are multiple ways of learning and thinking. And we've moved to something that I think we're all pretty uncomfortable with. Do we need to be told what to do to this extent? And given the content is absolutely apolitical and neutral, to serve some weird notion of society, politics, I'm not happy with that. I haven't answered Barbara's question, but I do think we have to come back to educational purpose and the relevance and applicability of what we're doing for the kids of our future now.
Absolutely. And I would urge you, if you've not seen the Vision for Education in Aotearoa New Zealand AEC report that I launched last Thursday, that's on the AEC Substack, you should check that out, because that will that talks to exactly that, education purpose and thinking about those big picture issues. Thank you again to my lovely guests and all of you for participating. I will close out with karakia. Kia tātou rangamarie, kia runga I ngā iwi o te ao. That your peace reign on all of us as we go forward into our Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Ka kite, everyone.
Kia ora. Thank
Kia
you.
ora, Claire.
Ngā mihi. Thank you.